Welcome to Season 2 of the Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. So today our guest is Criss Partee. He is a freelance writer and sports media professional, having been in the industry for over a decade. He is a veteran of radio and podcasting. Criss grew up in the Bay Area, but has lived in multiple states, including Texas, Oregon, and Washington over the past 6 years. When not working and writing articles, you can find Criss chilling with Netflix, watching a documentary or horror flick, or at the gym trying to stay in shape. While the world of sports is a big part of his life, Criss also cares about animals, helping those less fortunate, and social issues. Criss has been close friends with me and my family for over 10 years. In light of the rise in attacks in the Asian American community, I thought of Partee as someone who I could have a conversation with about race relations in a safe space. I want to preface the conversation by saying these are our own opinions. We are not saying we represent our entire race and ethnicity, but we want to have an honest conversation between us. So I'll read you some of the statistics that have come out. According to Chloe Shi via Asian Hustle Network, when COVID-19 hit, there have been 3,000 reported attacks, a 1,900% increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans since the pandemic started. Many incidents are unreported. The recent attacks that I will reference with Partee is the 84-year-old Vicha Radhan Pakti murder, and the murderer pled not guilty. 91-year-old man shoved to the ground by an attacker who shoved two other Asians in Oakland. 61-year-old Filipino man who got slashed in the subway. 64-year-old Vietnamese woman robbed of $1,000 of Lunar New Year money. And these are just a few. As a result, many Asian Americans are now speaking up about the anti-Asian sentiment, and for some, this has led to divisiveness between Black and Asian communities. So I wanted to welcome Partee. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk with my very old friend.
Oh, you first thing out, you're calling me old, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Well, how's staying in shape, buddy? Like you still got those guns? Like
I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. I'm almost 40, so I'm doing the best I can. But no, I've been good, and thank you. I'm glad that you thought of me. One of the first people you thought of to come on and have this conversation with you, because like you just stated, we go back, well over a decade now. And so I'm just glad to be here with you and talk about this. Some of these incidents and this all this craziness that's just going on. And yeah, it needs to stop. First of all, it needs to stop. Yeah. But yeah, we're going to get into that. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Nothing makes me happier than to have you on the show. It's been a long time coming, and I can't believe it had to happen in season 2, but I'm so glad you are here.
I'm proud of you though. You're doing your thing with the podcast. You're already on season 2, and yeah, like when I first saw that you were doing it, I think actually Vic sent me something and told me that you were doing the podcast. So I checked it out, and I'm like, look at Dr. Stephanie. She out here doing her thing.
Oh,
and it's good though. Especially the topics that you're talking about, especially dealing with mental health, because you're a doctor. That's what you do. That's what you deal with. So it's definitely needed for, staying connected with your Asian community, but also being inclusive of other communities as well, because mental health is important for everyone. It's not just excluded to one race or, one type of person. Everyone is dealing with mental health. Even if you don't know you're dealing with some issues, you probably are. So it's definitely something that needs to be talked about a lot more.
Well, you've lived in various areas. Obviously we're native Bay Area folks, yep. And there's not too many of us out here anymore, I guess. Yeah, but True. You've lived in a lot of places. Like, how have you adapted, and what have your experiences been there?
So like you just said, yeah, I've lived in, like you read in my bio, over, I guess I think I left the Bay Area at the end of 2014, early 2015. So it's been, a little bit over 6 years now. First moved to Austin, Texas, lived there, and then up here to Portland, and now right across the river from Portland in Vancouver, Washington. So as far as acclimating, there are always things you have to get used to. For one, I guess the first thing is being away from family and friends like you guys, especially being in Austin, it was so far away. And then just, I guess, acclimating to the culture of different areas that you're going to live in. There were times when I may have got, a little homesick. I've been back it's been a while since I've been back to visit. Probably, I think 2 years now was the last time I think it was like 2019, the last time I was there.
I think we had a barbecue
Yeah, something like that.
restaurant or something like that.
I know I met up with you guys and we went out to eat. But since then, and then the pandemic hit. So, I had planned to try to maybe make it down sometime last year. And obviously that didn't happen because of the pandemic. So, at times it can get a little rough being so far away from family and friends. But, one thing is just staying in contact with people. That really helps. And of course, making new friends and acquaintances wherever you're at. But just always having something as far as on the mental health side, something, when times get stressful, just having something, or I guess someone to help you, I guess, kind of deal with the burden of what's going on in the world, especially over the last year with the pandemic. It's been so different for everyone. I mean, I think it's probably safe to say that everyone has had a moment where they just kind of felt down and out at some point over the last year. If maybe you never felt like you had that before, but I know even myself just kind of, I went through a divorce a couple years ago, and just working through that and kind of rebuilding my life after that is what I've really, just been working on myself the last couple of years. And then the pandemic hit. So, I lost work at a certain point in there and bounced back pretty quickly. But, those things can really take a toll. So it's important, and just to have someone to talk to sometimes, or just venting is one of those things sometimes that helps me kind of get through the tough times.
So what have you learned about yourself throughout the process, like during the divorce, post-divorce, and obviously throughout the pandemic?
One thing that I kind of knew about myself already, I guess, but I really learned is I am the type of person that when things get rough, or when there seems like there's a roadblock, I figure out a way just to kind of keep pushing forward and keep moving on. Even at the times when I felt at my lowest, I always like to say, where there's a will, there's a way. That's a very old cliche, but that's
You're
just
old. You're old. It's
yeah, that's true. I am old. I mean, you probably can't see it, but I got some grays up. I got some grays.
I don't see anything.
Of course you do. I got some grays going on, but I really try to keep that in mind. That's something that my father used to always tell me when I was younger. Where there's a will, there's a way. It may seem like the world or everything is against you at a certain point, but you just have to figure out a way. Even if you have to reach out for help, sometimes you have to reach out to people around you for help. And that's something I'm still learning, I guess, how to do more frequently, is reach out for help, sometimes ask for advice, because we all need that. No one does everything on their own, even though we want to, and we like to think that, oh yeah, I'm self-made. And even the most self-made people, they had help.
Oh yeah.
So, and that's something that's been tough for me in the past, is to ask for help. So sometimes that's one of the things I've been working on with myself, is to, I guess, open up a little more and, ask for advice, ask for help sometimes. So, I mean, yeah, those are some of the things I've learned about myself just over, especially going through the divorce part. But I guess the same with the pandemic, just, keeping in contact and checking on people.
Yeah, we text at really like weird hours, and luckily we are.
I'm friends. Usually up like that though.
Yeah, me too. And so like, I think it's really helpful, like when you have a free moment, whenever it is, just to drop that text, right? Because we've talked about where you're going in with school and your career and like all these things, right? And so yeah. I think that it's really important just to, like you said, ask people what they're up to, even though you can't leave the house. People have had to figure out, what they like to do, what are their hobbies, how to stay connected.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's it's very important. I mean, even if it's, sometimes I know we're joking about how I'm getting old, but
okay, I'm not pushing 40 yet, but I would say, since we've been friends for over 10 years, like I'm getting older.
You're behind me, but I get what you're saying. You're behind me, but I get what you're saying. But even to check on, as younger people, we're both under 40, definitely. But even as younger people, to check on older relatives, especially.
Yeah.
That is important, whether if it's your mom and auntie and uncle, whoever it is, to check on those older relatives, especially the ones, I guess, that live on their own, just to check on them and see how they're doing, even if they're okay. Just, you can shoot them a text. What's up? How you doing? Just checking on you. Just things like that, just to make sure our people are doing okay.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna circle back because I want to
Yep,
really get into the meat of things for
let's do it.
sure. We both are from the Bay Area. I reached out to you because there has been a rise in Asian American attacks, as I've mentioned in the
Yeah.
opening of the show. And the thing is, I was and am so afraid sometimes of race wars because people associate, oh, well, this person killed an Asian American person, or this person pushed them. And now in Oakland, there's a patrol in the community, Asian Americans walking the streets and such. So I guess I'm wondering, well, first, what do you think about the attacks? What is your perspective on what the heck is going on here?
I wish I had an answer for what's going on. I mean, first, I just think it's despicable. I mean, looking at, just in the examples you used opening the show aren't the only examples, but these are some of the more recent and most prevalent, I guess you would say. Um, these are mostly older people that are being attacked. If I'm correct, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just, no one should be attacked at all. But people are going out of their way and attacking elderly people. That's just cowardice. I mean, that's just my opinion. That's just so cowardly. Um, Anybody committing acts like these, I don't care who it's against. They should, hopefully they're caught and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I mean, it's just, I wish I really knew what was going through people's minds when they do some of these things that they're doing. I mean, that it just, what would possess you to do that? You know what I mean? Like, why would you, maybe you had even if you had an incident with another Asian person, every Asian person didn't do that to you, and vice versa. The same thing, how we talk about blacks dealing with whites, it's the same thing. You have a white person that may look at a black person like this. Well, every black person didn't do that to them, or every white
Yes.
person didn't do this to someone black. Me personally, I just don't look at the world like that. Just because someone over here may have called me the N-word, or they may have looked at me or profiled me in a certain manner because I was in their store and they just assumed I was going to steal because I'm black. Well, I'm not going to now look at you because you're Asian and they were Asian, like, oh, well, you think the same way, because obviously you don't. We're friends, so obviously you don't think like that. But I just don't understand the thought process. For me personally, it's the way you're raised, because a lot of it comes down to respect for people, just people in general, just respecting people in general. To go out and do something like this is just unacceptable. It is just unacceptable. And I was reading an article kind of based on some of these incidents that are happening, and some of these victims are afraid to come forward and
Yeah.
file police reports because of a language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
That's another obstacle right there. So not only are these incidents happening, they're largely going unreported. So the people that are committing these crimes, they're out there probably committing more crimes and doing the same thing to other elderly people.
Right.
Is so I mean, there's definitely a disconnect, and there's a gap that needs to be closed. As far as, I mean, first of all, these things need to stop. They just need to stop outright. But the people that these things are happening to, them and their families, need to know that it is okay to come forward and talk to the police, file police reports, because that's the only way you're going to get these people off of the street that are committing these acts.
Obviously, the socio-political pandemic is going on parallel to this COVID pandemic, right? Is
Yeah, really.
how I kind of view it. And so a lot of people are making comparisons with the BLM and the current movement of Asian solidarity, et cetera. What do you think is happening with the divisiveness between Black and Asian communities?
Being different races, and even more specific than races, being, different cultures, because you can have multiple cultures within a race. So it's not just
Absolutely.
it's not just always down to, oh,
It's not
African American.
homogenous. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's not always like that. But sometimes it feels like we're trying to, just as people, we're trying to step to the front and say, oh, where our struggle is bigger than your struggle. You know what I mean? There was another article that I was reading while I was preparing for the show and just, going over some notes and things. I forget the author's name, but when she, I guess it was over a year ago, when she first started writing about these incidents, and she would talk about how these incidences were racist or they were race-based and they were hate crimes, which they are. They're all hate crimes. And this was on social media. She was posting these things and writing about these things. People would jump on and say, oh, well, that's not real racism. You know, as if to say, because, oh, someone didn't, you know, I guess put you in a certain place and tell you, oh, you have to live there. You know, because sometimes racism can have to do with power. And that's what we talk about in the Black community as far as when it comes to white people, you know, primarily talking about how we were placed in certain areas of certain cities and the worst areas of cities, basically because it's not happening to someone Black that it's not racist. Well, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? That's not how it works. These incidents, you know, if you don't want to call it racism, then that's on you. It's a hate crime, point blank. And it's based in race. Now, some of these people committing these crimes, they have not been caught. So we can't ask them, you know, what led you to do this? Not yet. Hopefully they will be caught at some point. And then, you know, they need to, like I said earlier, they need to be prosecuted fully for what they've done. Because some people have died over the, you know, over these incidents. It's not, it's not just pushing someone down, but when you're 91 years old and you get pushed down, that may kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just point blank. So, I mean, it's just unfortunate. Me personally, I don't like to see that. Because it just goes back to the thing. It's like, okay, now it's a competition over whose struggle is worse.
Right.
We're both struggling.
It's not it's not a suffering competition.
It's not a competition. Yeah. That's the thing. And that's how some people look at it, honestly. I won't say that's what I think, but I know that. I've seen that. That's how some people look at it. It's, oh, well, you're not struggling as much as us. It's like, you're not struggling as much as us. We're both struggling. Yeah. Okay. We're both fighting for equality. Okay. Let's bring it together. We can do that together. It doesn't have to be separate. It doesn't have to be Asian, Latino, Black, Hispanic. It doesn't have to be that. We can all fight for that together.
And how do you suppose that we do that? Because I think that's like the big question mark right now, right? Some people are fundraising, some people are speaking out, some people are organizing community events. And I know that there's not one answer to kind of you know, put it all together. It's a very complex question that's been, thing proposed way before we were born.
I mean,
however, we need some actionable steps here to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, and all of those things are great, but I also think we need to try, like you mentioned, community events. We need to try to understand each other and the culture that we come from. You know what I mean? Like whether it's, you know, Black and Asians understanding each other's backgrounds and where we come from. Because here's the thing, especially us growing up in the Bay Area, we went to school with pretty much everybody. I know I did. And I mean, the friend that we met through, you know, he's Black. You guys went to what, elementary school together,
we were
right?
so close. And not to play into stereotypes, but no one kicked my ass because Laji was my close friend. Okay.
You had the big Black guy on your side.
I'm just saying.
You know?
I'm just saying. But you know, kickball king, you know, that's
kickball
what's going on.
Hey, sometimes it'd be like that. But no, and that's a beautiful thing. But that's what I'm saying. It's like in the Bay Area, you know, because, you know, there's still people out here that only grow up around who looks like them. There's certain parts of the country it's just all white, and you have one Asian kid, one Black kid, one Latino kid in a school, or, you know, maybe two or three, whatever it is, you know, they're sprinkled in. There's still a lot of areas like that.
They're sprinkles.
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty much you know, they're sprinkles. Not to make light of it, but they are. So I think we were fortunate to grow up in the Bay Area where we went to school with everybody.
Well, it's a joke. And at the same time, you would think of sprinkles as like one decoration, but it's not viewed that way a lot of the time. It's not viewed as like something that's amazing to be in that situation, because when you're feeling isolated and automatically people group you with two other, let's say, Asian or Black people, you might even not even like those people.
Exactly. And that's what happens. Yeah, it does happen. It's, I guess, especially when you're younger at that age. Yeah. The Black kids are going to be grouped together. The Asian, unless you're somewhere where it's really, really diverse. You know what I mean? Unless you're like, because even in the Bay Area, yeah, it's diverse. There's still a lot of white people, but I mean, it's a lot more diverse than most other areas of the country outside of maybe a New York or like a Los Angeles. The Bay
Sure.
Area is very diverse, but kind of let me circle back. What I was, going to say is that we need to try to understand each other's cultures because all of us, speaking specifically to Asian and Black cultures, we all like certain things from the other culture, whether it be something with entertainment, music, style and fashion, sports, whatever it is, and in that sports, I'm going to include martial arts because I took karate and judo growing up. There's a lot of Black kids that took karate growing up. So I think we need to get back to actually learning about the backgrounds of those things that we like about the other cultures and the people behind those things, and not just take, but actually learn about why, who started this or who did that and why we love these things so much.
Well, you're a big sports guy, right?
Yeah.
And Jeremy Lin recently penned a whole statement on how people are calling him coronavirus or
Stuff like that.
All that stuff, right? And so someone who has broken barriers or a non-traditional path to be in the NBA and now working towards getting back into the NBA.
Yeah.
What can we do in that regard? Because he's at the professional level and he's still experiencing this.
Exactly.
And people at school are being called Kung Flu and, all this stuff.
Yeah. One, we talk about it all the time, especially with sports like football and basketball, I guess talking about Black people as far as representation at higher levels. We always talk about Black coaches or Black team executives and things like that. Well, the same thing goes for Asians. We need more, it's going to take more representation as far as, it doesn't even have to necessarily be Asian players, but maybe more Asian coaches because here's the thing, you don't necessarily have to play in the NBA or NFL to become a coach. Mm-hmm. And that gets overlooked sometimes. You have a lot of Black coaches or white coaches that go to great heights in either profession, coaching or even as executives, but they never step foot on a basketball court in the NBA or a football field in the NFL. So representation is definitely important. So, starting at younger ages and growing up in the Bay Area, a lot of Asian kids play basketball and football with us and all these things, but we need to make it more and create pathways for them along with us to go, after, maybe you don't play past high school, but maybe you want to coach. So creating paths for them to become coaches and maybe move up the ranks and things like that. So, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely about, representation is definitely important. And sometimes people don't really understand that, but it's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's hard to understand it if you're usually represented. So if you're not represented, then you get it. Like we can kind of understand, especially, the NBA with Jeremy Lin, there's been literally a handful of prominent, like Asian players in the NBA that we know of. Okay. Barely a handful. And then when I say prominent, I mean, we know of them. We know of Yao Ming, we know of Jeremy Lin. There's been a couple others, but they didn't do much. But there's only been a couple that we actually know as household names. So if we can get a little more representation in there, then, and I mean, not just as players, even working for teams as coaches and working their way up the same way Black players do or anyone else does, white players as well, then that can kind of start. And usually, as far as sports go, usually what the pros do, it kind of trickles down. It trickles down to college.
The culture.
It trickles down on as far as the culture into college and into high school and even lower than that, coming up. So yeah, representation is really big when it comes to these type of things.
Let's circle back because you talked about understanding each other's culture. So giving insight into how you grew up and the people that you were around, what can you tell us about your background, your culture, your friends, your family? I guess my growing up was, as far as who I was around, it was pretty diverse because, like I said, growing up in the Bay Area, we went to school with everybody. So when I was really young, I think for kindergarten and I think also first grade probably, Garfield Elementary up by Coit Tower.
I went there for 2 years. That school was predominantly Asian at that
Mm-hmm.
time. When I was that young. So like growing up and even learning a little bit of Mandarin. I don't remember any of it, but learning
I was like, hey, say something right now.
I mean,
that I won't understand anyways, but
I'm not even gonna lie to you. We learned it, but I mean, it was so long ago. If you don't use it, then you lose it. So, but that was for me, that was an experience because it was like, the neighborhood I lived in the Fillmore and the Western Addition was primarily Black. And then I would go to school every day, and it was, the school was probably, I'm just throwing a number out, maybe 20% like Black and white kids. It was mostly Asian. The school was mostly Asian. So that was also a learning experience for me at a young age to be around other culture, to be around another culture. So I think for me, that really stuck with me going forward to see that, okay, they're not any different from me.
Were you treated any differently being in that 25%? I
don't think so. Not that I remember, no. And then, me and my mother, we ended up moving to the East Bay. So, like I said, I only went there, later on. I think we moved to the East Bay when I was like 8 or 9. So, I mean, I went to that school for a couple of years. Because it was so long ago. I've never heard my mom or grandmother or anybody say that we had any bad experiences with that school. So as far as I can say, no, I don't think I was treated any differently. I actually enjoyed the school a lot from what I remember. So I don't think I was treated any differently. But I just think, something like that, I think I was fortunate to have that experience because I think those early experiences, if you're opened up, I think if children are opened up to different cultures and people that may not necessarily look like them at an earlier age, I think that benefits you going forward as far as life, because you look at life a little differently. You know what I mean? Like you're probably less likely to only want to hang out with Black people in my case, because I have friends of all different, Asian friends, Hispanic friends, Latino friends, I have Middle Eastern friend. My ex-wife is from the Middle East. So, I mean, I have friends of all different races and shape, sizes, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter to me. It just never has really to me. But that's me though. Everybody's not like that, but that's just me.
And I think that's because of what you're talking about, though, is that exposure early on and similar. And I think it really speaks to that racism really is taught because in elementary school, most of my friends were Black. I mean, it was Black, Asian. My best friend was Latina and white. It was very, very mixed, but majority in my close group, And I'll tell you a funny story because I went over to Laji's house for a sleepover.
Yeah.
With my brother and everything. His sister had a crush on my brother, blah, blah, blah.
I know.
Yeah. And she'll never live it down. So
my boy Kevin. That's my dude right there.
Exactly. So anyways, for me, Laji's parents are pretty religious. And so I just thought Laji's my friend. Crystal is, Kevin's friend.
Right?
And I just like sleep on the floor in his room. And she caught me and she was like, no, you have to sleep in Crystal's room, right?
I know.
So
I know Miss James.
Yeah, she doesn't play, right? So, but the point is that I got to experience my friend's background, his house, like how it worked, and mine was very different. I mean, it surprisingly, my parents are Americanized, so I did go to sleepovers. I did go to my best friend's house in elementary school and stuff like that, which isn't pretty, quote unquote, typical of Asian American parents. But I think what you're really speaking to is to open people's eyes and not be so insulated as a culture. And it was a surprise to me because in middle school is very diverse, but then I started hanging out with more Asians. I think that's when kind of that awareness happens where people start clicking off. And
around middle school, early high school. Yeah, definitely by high school.
Exactly. And by high school, like I went to Losos, like 90% Asian, but moving forward, then you realize when I was in Virginia and all those things, like true ethnic minority and like an overall university. So I think, when we grow up, we are becoming more and more programmed. So how do you think that we can deprogram ourselves to start, again, exposing ourselves to other kinds of people?
Well, like you just alluded to, or you didn't allude to it, you said it. Racism is something that's taught. So it's on parents to allow children to explore and not just allow them, but maybe, make it a point to introduce them to other cultures.
How do you think as adults we can reprogram ourselves to break down these barriers, because a lot of us are insulated in communities that of people that look like us?
Sometimes we just got to be willing to, step out of our comfort zone, but also being inclusive of everyone, especially people that don't look like us. Just and like I said earlier, one is basic respect, and then the other is trying to understand in this type of case, not make it an issue or a competition over who has the bigger struggle or who suffered more in this country or in this area, things like that, but more so just being open and being inclusive of others, especially those that don't look like us, and to not just off the bat assume, oh well, this person's black so they're this way, or this person's Asian so they must be that way. No, not that. Get to know people first. Everyone, it's not clear across the board. Everyone from one race or from one neighborhood is not the same. Everyone's not going to be the same. So you just have to keep that in mind and be more open. And I think, it's easier, like you stated earlier, as children, it's easier to be that way unless you're taught not to be that way. You know what I mean? So, and like you said, right around middle school, early high school, we kind of start becoming more self-aware and we get a little cliquish. So even at that age to step out a little bit, but like you said, a lot of your friends were black growing up. I had a lot of different friends of different races. Most of my friends growing up were black, but I had a lot of white friends. I had Asian friends. I had Latino friends. So I had friends, that kind of, went across the board as far as race and culture goes. So just being open to that. And it helps when, as far as only the adult end, it helps for children to have parents or adults around them that are open to letting them be open as far as who their friends are and who they can hang out with and learn from. So, I mean, all those things I think factor into that.
And so here's a more logistical question. How do you go about meeting people of different races? Let's say in San Francisco today, right? People, you don't go in a coffee shop and you just be like, hey, especially now it's COVID, but you don't just go into like a certain neighborhood and be like, hey, can you be my friend? I want to learn more about different cultures, right? There's how do you do that?
You know what I've kind of noticed, and I've talked with other people about this. I have a good friend of mine that's actually from the Bay Area, but lives up here in the Portland area as well. Moved up here probably a year or two before I did. We were talking a while back, and we were just talking about how as you get older, it seems like it's harder to make new friends. Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever thought about that? I don't. It's like you don't meet a lot of, at least, I lived in Austin, and, I probably had a couple people that I would actually say that, oh yeah, that was my, they're my friend. I made those are the new friends I made. And because I'm not so liberal about how I use the word friend as a lot of people are. I'm just not, because everybody's not your friend. We have friends, we have acquaintances. Like you and Vic, you're my friends. I call you friends. Okay.
Oh my God, I feel so honored.
I don't know if you should, but man, but I do consider you guys friends. I've been in your home and things like that, and we've hung out. We've hung out with each other's parents and significant others, and all these things. So I consider you a friend. So I don't really throw that word around liberally. That's why I say I don't have a ton of friends. I have some close friends, but I don't even know how I would go about that today. Me personally, I strike up conversations with people at the DMV. Definitely, I've struck up conversations with people at the airport many times. Hell, I'll give you a story. One year, one of our trips that me and Laji made to Vegas, way back when, this is like probably mid-20s, 25, 26. I struck up a conversation with a lady that was, sitting next to me on the plane. We ended up dating for like 9 months. Okay, so I strike up, and she wasn't black, she was white. I strike up conversations with people anywhere, and that's just me. But that's not everybody, though. I understand that. So I don't really know how to say, how do you just go about that? But you just have to be open. Like I said before, you just have to be open and sometimes step outside of your comfort zone and be open to new people and new experiences. Okay, maybe you grew up, maybe you're Asian and you only grew up around Asians, or maybe you're black or Latino, you only pretty much grew up around the people that look like you, or maybe speak the same language as you, whatever it is. You just have to be open sometimes. And I think as adults, once we get into our adult lives and we have families, we have work, and sometimes even still school, whatever it is, we get so caught up in ourselves. Sometimes we let those opportunities pass us by to make a new friend. I'm sure this happens a lot. So I just think you have to be open and, not necessarily just look at whether, the color of someone's skin to determine who they are. Just get to know people. You know what I mean? Just get to know people. And I keep going back to it, but just, overall being respectful, respect people, just respect people.
The other part, though, is that some people are worried about offending other people. So, I mean, how do you walk that line, right? Of like, they have every intention of being respectful, but then they say something that's just, it's cringy.
I guess, if you have to question something in your head, then you probably shouldn't say it. Unless you really know the person, you know what I mean? Like me and Vic were talking a few minutes ago, and we're joking with each other, but we know each other. We've gone on trips together. Me, Vic, Kevin, whoever it is, we've gone on trips together. So it's one thing when you know someone, you can kind of go across the line because you know the limits you can push. Mm-hmm. And Vic likes to do that with me, and I do it with him. So, it works out. But just in general, as far as where new people go, just have a conversation. Some people, I think, they want to be the funny guy or the funny girl and crack a joke, but you don't always have to do that. Just be yourself. Now, maybe yourself is just a jackass. I don't know. I'm sorry. Can I curse on here? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
That's the first one I dropped, though. So
no, it's good. It's good.
Maybe sometimes you're just a jerk, and that's just you. Well, hey, if that's just you, then that's going to give the other person, what they need to decide if they want to, have a friendship with you or not. But I just think sometimes we try too hard as far as trying to impress people or come off a certain way. Just be yourself. Talk, have a conversation. I know a lot of people don't like small talk, but sometimes that's how you get a conversation started, and you go from there. I don't think there's any just one specific way. You know what I mean?
Well, let me say this. I think there's something about you, Partee, making people feel super comfortable, and it's because you are super friendly and
I try
and freaking hilarious, right? And so, regardless of what we identify as our race or ethnicity, like we all have a good time. And so I guess I wonder, beyond that, it's like you said, it's not only being respectful, the and part is just being friendly, being empathic, having fun, and learning each other's boundaries. And I think people become closer when they cross the line, but you're already building a relationship and you're like, dude, that's no, like that's a no for me. And that helps. So I think being vocal about when people have crossed the line before it gets to the point where like it's friendship ending is really important to you. You and Vic like rock bottom each other. So I feel that brings people closer, to be able to say,
we're goofy though. We're different.
That's what I love about you guys, right?
We're different.
Like, you can say stuff and people feel very comfortable on you. And you are very much like him in that, like, because of the way you guys are, people feel instantly close to you, but you're like, I don't know you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, but I think the point is that, it works. And I think it works because we all have fun together and we meet each other's families. We had like a crazy story, the C word. We had a story where another mutual friend actually grew up with you totally didn't know that
So
you guys
random.
grew up together.
So random.
We were just describing you, and he was like, "Oh, did he wear glasses?" And he kind of had like big eyes, and
And you know what's funny about that? So you're talking about Kevin.
Yes.
Our mothers worked together when we were like really young children. Like we probably met when we were 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So our mothers worked together for about 4 or 5 years, maybe. And so we would, periodically, many times we would go to their house, have dinner, they come to our house, or we go hang out and do different things with our families or whatever it was. And then, over time, people move and our mothers are still kept in contact, but, we became teenagers, we kind of did our own thing and we lost contact, whatever it was. And just, it was even a couple times I think that we were all over to you and Vic's house for wrestling or whatever it was, and we were in each other's presence, but it never clicked. You know what I mean? Like it was a couple times and it never clicked. And then finally, when we were all down in New Orleans for WrestleMania some years back, Kevin looked at me and
oh, that's how it happened. Okay.
Yeah, and he was like, "Is your mom's name Wanda?" I was like, yeah. And then it just kind of came to me. I was like, oh my God. And then it just clicked there. And it's just amazing how small the world is. But I mean, like I said, we knew each other. And I mean, at this time, we were probably already like 30, 31 years old and hadn't seen each other, like from what we knew, hadn't seen each other in maybe 20 years, 15, 20 years. So it was just amazing how that happened. And like everything just came back like right then. I was like, oh my God, I never even didn't even trip off that.
Well, that's the cool part, right? Is that you guys take guys trips together and go to before COVID again.
Yeah.
Wrestling events and like meet in different cities. And I mean, you guys hang out, you travel together, and that to me is amazing. And Vic actually had that experience in Austin when people came up to you guys and were like, "Are you guys the movers?" Vic was like pissed, but then you were like, "No, we're not," and then moved on. And so it's interesting how, because we have lived in the Bay Area since coming back from Virginia, how it infuriated him versus you're just like, and maybe it's just your general orientation too, but it's just like, no.
I mean, sometimes, I don't know, and I don't want to say it, I don't want to put it as like, oh, I'm just used to people discriminating or being racist, but I just don't pay people attention sometimes. Now, probably 10 years prior to that, in my early 20s, I probably would have got pissed. I used to have temper issues, okay, but I've mellowed out. I've always been pretty mellow, but I've mellowed out even more over the last, definitely the last 10 years, 10, 15 years. So I was just like, whatever, it just didn't, it just not going to let it get to me, because I always look at it like, okay, I could get pissed off and go off on this person, but then what is that going to lead to? I just always try to look at consequences and think about things, because sometimes if you react to someone and they react back, now you're in a whole situation and it's just not worth it. Like, yeah, they were out of line for saying that to us, but it's like, all right, whatever. Like, I just don't have time to, get into a conflict over something, over your small mindedness. I don't have time for that. So I was like, whatever, just, forget about it.
On a hopeful note, we talked about coming together as a community and ways to kind of be open and meet people. Now, I guess to close out the show, I really wanted to talk and touch upon Fred Hampton and what we were talking about in terms of the Rainbow Coalition. Yeah. And I think it was a recommendation from one of my friends and a previous guest, Eric Young, who was saying this person was assassinated by the government because he was able to accomplish that solidarity. So in his spirit, what do you think that we can do? And also, what are the risks do you think we face by coming together? I mean, in a way, it could be viewed as a threat by some in power.
That's exactly what it is. And with Fred Hampton, I mean, his story is amazing. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the movie, the Judas and the Messiah. I haven't seen it yet either. I know a little bit about his story, but it's amazing. I mean, he was 21 years old. Okay. all the things he accomplished with the Panthers and with the Rainbow Coalition and bringing Blacks, Latinos, Asians, bringing these different groups, different minorities and different cultures together. I mean, he did all these things within about a year. Okay. If you really just look at his bio, you would think this was over a 5-10 year span. All these things that happened with him in his life, the arrests, and he did a little prison time, all these different things happened over a couple years, but really with the Black Panthers and the Rainbow Coalition, that all happened over about a year span. So it's just really amazing to see what he was able to accomplish. But also, it's really, I guess, I don't know if it's amazing, but just to see how much of a threat the government thought he was to the power structure in America. Because that's really what it came down to. He's bringing together basically pretty much all the disenfranchised people of this nation. At that time, it even included poor white people within that group that were a part of the Rainbow Coalition. In the beginning, at least, it included poor white people. So it wasn't just people of color against white people. It was all the people that felt that were disenfranchised at that time, including poor white people, that were coming together and basically standing up against the government. And of course, they could not have that happen. So they did what they had to do, what they felt they had to do. It didn't need to be done because they were fighting for equality. Like we're fighting for equality now. That's what they were fighting for. And that's what they wanted, was equality, and to not be targeted and profiled just because they looked a certain way or their skin was a certain color. Okay. Well, that's what he was fighting for.
Fred Hampton, the civil rights lawyers that were trying to defend for the case were white.
Yeah.
And they, to this day, still are seeking justice, at least, or acknowledgement that this was a cover up. Right. And it would be a huge blow to the system, to the government, to have this. And I'm not talking, trying to get into this whole conspiracy theory thing. No. That's not where it's at. But what I do want to say, 21 years old, they also assassinated the Black Panther leader at the time. And it was because they were able to facilitate solidarity. Yeah. And so what can we learn from them and how they did things now?
I think one of the things that we can learn is, if it's worth fighting for to you, then stay the long haul. Because, had he not been killed, he would have been in it for the long haul. You know what I mean? Looking back at his story, and I mean, even in high school, there was an interracial council that he helped to co-found within his high school that he led. So activism was just within him, to begin with, then joining the Black Panthers and all the, starting the Rainbow Coalition. So, but I think it's just, if you're going to fight for something like this, protest and rallies and demonstrations, those are great. And those are things that we need. They're a right of ours within the, Constitution. We have a right to protest and things like that. But you just have to understand that there are going to come tough times and there's going to be backlash. People are not going to like it, but we just got to stay the hall and keep fighting, like what's been going on, over the last 5 years, after the Kaepernick stuff, with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then, into George Floyd and, everything else that's going on. And now we have, movements for the Asian community as well. So these groups need to come together. It should not be any bickering between these groups. You know what I mean? There shouldn't be any bickering. It shouldn't be our struggle is greater than yours. We're all looking for equality. So we can all fight together. We can all have the same goal and strive for the same goal. It doesn't have to be separate. You know what I mean?
That's a mic drop situation, right?
Boom. If I had a mic sound, I'd drop it, but
maybe Ronald could insert that in.
There we go.
In the video, but I mean, that was a heck of a way to end the show. And so again, I want to thank you so much for being here. And
anytime.
I think we can keep fighting the good fight together and support each other throughout the rest of our lives.
Always. And thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed this. This was good. Thank you.
It was fun. Definitely. Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.